There are stories that remind us that light always finds its way through darkness. Welcome to Paws and Light, where every soul deserves a second chance. If you believe in the healing power of love, subscribe and stay until the end of this story. The shelter worker had warned everyone about the dog in the last kennel. He never made a sound. Not a bark, not a whimper, not even a growl. Just silence. The kind of silence that felt like a wound that never healed. They said he was broken. That whatever happened before he arrived had stolen something essential from him. Dogs are supposed to bark. They're supposed to make noise, to communicate, to exist loudly in the world. But this one didn't. He just sat in the corner of his cage, eyes distant, body trembling whenever footsteps approached. People came. People left. Nobody wanted the silent dog. And time was running out. The shelter had a policy: 12 months maximum for unadoptable dogs. After that, transfer to final chance. Facilities? Places where hope went to die. Hush had 2 weeks left. Until a little girl walked down that corridor, her mother's hand guiding her gently. She couldn't hear the shelter's chaos. She lived in silence too. When she stopped in front of his kennel, something impossible began. The Riverside Animal Shelter sat at the edge of town, where morning fog rolled thick and afternoon sun barely broke through high windows. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and damp concrete, mixed with kibble and fear. The dog had arrived on a Tuesday in March. No name, no history, just a frayed collar and eyes that had seen too much. The intake form said approximately 3 years old and extremely withdrawn. What it didn't say was that he'd been found tied to a fence post in the rain, shaking so hard the officers thought he might be sick. At the shelter, he was given the temporary name Hush, a cruel irony nobody intended. Cage 17 became his world. 6 by 8 feet of concrete. Floor, metal bars, and a thin blanket he refused to lie on. He stayed in the corner, always in the corner, watching everything with eyes that looked like they were apologizing for existing. The other dogs barked. They howled. They pressed against their gates, tails wagging desperately. But Hush remained silent. Volunteers tried to walk him. He would go, but with his head low, body tense, as if waiting for punishment with every step. Nobody chose silence. 8 months passed. Then 9. Then 10. The shelter director started leaving notes on his cage. 11 months transfer eligible soon. The weekend volunteers stopped making eye contact with Hush. It hurt too much to watch hope dying slowly behind bars. Then came Emma. She was 7 years old, with dark curls and 2 ponytails and a purple hearing aid visible behind her right ear. Born deaf, living in a world that moved around her in silence. Her mother Sarah had been searching for something, anything to help her daughter feel less alone after a difficult year at school, where Emma came home crying, "Sign in, nobody understands me," with trembling hands. A friend suggested a dog. Not for hearing assistance. Just for companionship. For love. They'd visited 3 shelters already. Emma had touched the paws of a dozen dogs through bars, felt their warmth, watched their mouths open in barks she couldn't hear. But none felt right. Sarah couldn't explain it, but she knew her daughter was waiting for something specific. Something that spoke her language. At Riverside, they walked slowly down the main corridor. Emma's small hand traced the concrete wall, feeling the vibrations of all those barking dogs. Her eyes moved from cage to cage, observant, patient. Then she stopped. At cage 17, where Hush sat in his corner, silent and still, his dark eyes meeting hers. 2 weeks before his transfer date, Marcus approached carefully. "Oh, honey. Maybe not that one. He's having a hard time adjusting. Let me show you friendlier dogs." But Emma didn't move. She knelt in front of the cage, small fingers wrapping around cold metal bars. She tilted her head, studying the dog with intensity that made Sarah's chest tighten. Hush stared back. For the first time in months, he lifted his head fully. Not much, just enough. Just a fraction that meant everything. Sarah bent beside her daughter. "Emma, sweetheart, we can look at others. But Emma was already reaching her hand through the bars. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, ready to intervene, but something made him pause. Maybe the calmness in the little girl's face. Maybe the way the dog wasn't moving away. Hush watched Emma's hand. It wasn't grabbing, wasn't demanding, just there. Palm up, waiting, patient. The seconds stretched like hours. Other volunteers stopped to watch. The shelter noise seemed to fade. Even the other dogs quieted, as if sensing they were witnessing something sacred. Hush's body trembled. His ears flattened. Every instinct told him to stay back, stay small, stay safe in his corner. But something about this little girl was different. She didn't tower over him, didn't make loud sounds, didn't move with sharp, unpredictable energy that made his heart race. She just waited. And then, impossibly, Hush stood up. His legs shook as he took one step forward, then another. Head low, tail tucked, but moving toward her. Toward the hand that promised nothing but patience. Ona's nose finally touched Emma's palm. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. The little girl's face broke into the widest smile. She didn't squeal with excitement. She just held perfectly still, letting the dog investigate her scent, her warmth, her presence. Hush sniffed her hand carefully, then her wrist. Then, in a moment that made Marcus forget to breathe, the dog pressed his head against the bars, leaning into her touch as Emma's fingers gently scratched behind his ear. No sound, no bark of greeting, no whimper of relief. Just silence, meeting silence. And understanding filling the space between them, like light through fog. "Mom," Emma signed with her free hand, eyes never leaving the dog. "This one, he's like me." Sarah looked at Marcus, who was wiping his eyes. He nodded slowly. "We were going to transfer him next week," he admitted quietly. "But if you want him, he's yours." Sarah looked at her daughter's face, more alive than she'd seen in months. "Yes," she signed back. "He's exactly like you." The adoption took 3 days. 3 days of paperwork, home visits, and careful conversations about managing expectations. The shelter staff were honest about Hush's challenges. He'd been traumatized. He might never be normal. He might always be afraid. Sarah signed every word to Emma. And Emma, with fierce determination only a 7-year-old can possess, signed back, "I'll wait for him. However long it takes." When they brought Hush home, he spent the first 2 hours under the living room coffee table. The darkest, smallest space he could find. He pressed himself against the wall, making his body invisible. Emma sat on the floor 6 feet away, drawing in her notebook, occasionally glancing up but never approaching. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, fighting every maternal instinct to intervene. But she'd read the literature. Trauma couldn't be rushed. Trust couldn't be forced. Days passed in careful stillness. Emma would wake early, tiptoe downstairs, and sit doing homework while Hush watched from whatever corner he'd claimed. She never cornered him, never demanded attention. She simply existed near him, radiating calm acceptance. On day 5, Sarah's phone rang. "Marcus from the shelter. Just checking in. How's it going with Hush?" Sarah glanced at the living room where the dog was still hiding under the table. "It's slow?" A pause. "Sarah, I need to be honest. We've had families return dogs when the adjustment was too difficult. Especially with Emma being so young. If it's not working out, it's working," Sarah said firmly, even though doubt crept in at 3 a.m. "We just need time." After she hung up, she found Emma sitting cross-legged in front of the coffee table, tears streaming down her face, signing to herself, "Why won't he love me?" Sarah's heart shattered. But Emma didn't give up. She left treats near his water bowl, not right next to him, that felt threatening, but close enough he'd find them. She'd watch, as he'd wait until she turned away before eating them, eyes constantly scanning for danger that never came. At night, Emma would lie on the couch reading books with her mother. And Hush would creep closer. First to the hallway edge. Then the doorway. Then, after 2 weeks, to the corner of the living room where he could see them, but still feel safe. Then came the night that tested everything. Sarah had been making dinner when she realized she hadn't seen Hush in over an hour. Emma was doing homework, unaware. Sarah checked under the coffee table, the bathroom, behind the couch. Every hiding spot. Nothing. Panic rose. The back door had been open for 5 minutes, while she'd taken out trash. Had he run? Had they pushed too hard? She spent 3 hours searching the neighborhood, Emma beside her with a flashlight, the little girl's face tight with worry. They called his name, though he wouldn't respond. They checked every yard, every alley. At midnight, defeated and terrified, they returned home. And found Hush sitting on the front porch, waiting. He'd been there the whole time. He'd gone outside but stayed close. Stayed home. Because somewhere in those 2 weeks, home had started to mean something. Emma collapsed beside him, hugging him for the first time. And Hush, trembling but present, led her. The breakthrough came on a Thursday when Emma was practicing piano. She couldn't hear the notes, but her teacher had taught her to feel the vibrations through her fingertips and the resonance in her chest. She played. Slowly, carefully. Hush emerged from the hallway. Sarah saw him first and pressed her hand over her mouth. The dog walked, actually walked, not crept across the floor. His tail was still low, body still tense, but he moved with purpose toward the piano bench. When he reached Emma, he lay down, right there beside her feet. And as Emma's fingers pressed the keys, Hush's body relaxed fraction by fraction. The vibrations. He could feel them too. The music that wasn't quite sound. The rhythm that existed in sensation rather than hearing. Emma finished and looked down. When she saw Hush beside her, her face transformed. She slowly slid off the bench and sat on the floor, cross-legged, an arm's length away. They sat like that for 20 minutes. Not touching, just being together in the quiet. That night, Hush didn't hide at bedtime. He followed Emma upstairs. When she climbed under her covers, he stood in her doorway, watching. Emma patted the floor beside her bed. Once. An invitation, not a command. Hush hesitated. His entire body vibrated with internal war between fear and longing. Then he took a step into the room. Then another. Until he reached the small rug beside Emma's bed and, with a soft exhale, almost like a sigh, he lay down. Emma reached her hand down over the bed's edge, letting it dangle within reach. After a moment, Hush scooted closer, just enough that his head rested against her fingertips. The weeks that followed brought more small miracles. Hush started greeting Emma at the door after school, not with jumping or barking, but with his tail slightly raised, eyes less haunted. He began to play cautiously with a soft rope toy. Emma taught him signs. Sit. Stay. Come. He'd watch with intelligence that suggested he understood more than commands. He understood connection. But he still never barked. Not once. 3 months after the adoption, they'd settled into a rhythm. But Sarah noticed something strange in those final days, before everything changed. Emma complained of being tired. A headache here and there. Sarah chalked it up to school. Growth spurts, normal kid stuff. But Hush had noticed something more. He wouldn't leave Emma's side. Not for food. Not for walks. He stayed pressed against her legs, eyes tracking her every movement with intensity that made Sarah's stomach tighten with unease she couldn't name. He was watching her. Waiting. Like he knew something they didn't. Emma had gone to bed early that Tuesday evening, her headache worse than usual. Sarah gave her medicine and tucked her in, kissing her forehead, which felt slightly warm, and signing, "I love you," before turning off the light. Hush had already assumed his position on the rug beside Emma's bed, but tonight, he was different. Restless. His eyes never closed. He stared at Emma with such intensity that Sarah almost said something, but decided against it. Sarah went downstairs to finish work emails, the baby monitor app on her phone connected to Emma's room. Just in case. Around 9:30, Sarah heard it through the monitor. At first, she thought the device was glitching, static. But then it came again. Clearer. Barking. Frantic. Desperate. Urgent barking that sounded like it was tearing through years of silence all at once. Sarah's heart stopped. That sound was coming from Emma's room. She took the stairs 3 at a time, mind racing through terrible possibilities. She burst through the bedroom door. In the glow from the hallway she could see Hush standing on Emma's bed, something he'd never done, barking with an intensity that seemed to pour out every silent month of his pain. And Emma wasn't moving. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side, hands shaking as she touched Emma's face. The little girl's skin was burning hot, her breathing shallow, rapid. The mild fever from earlier had spiked into something dangerous. Emma, baby, wake up. Hush kept barking, his voice raw and cracking, with months of disuse suddenly channeling into this's pure, urgent need. He pawed at Emma's blanket, looked at Sarah with wild eyes, then back at Emma, his meaning crystal clear. Help her. Something's wrong. Help her now. Sarah grabbed her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers, while keeping her other hand on Emma's burning forehead. Her daughter's eyes fluttered, but didn't open. My daughter, she's 7, high fever, not responding. Hush's barking never stopped. It filled the house, echoed down the stairs, poured through the open window. Into the quiet suburban night. The sound of a soul that had finally found something worth making noise for. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes, 7 minutes during which Hush never stopped barking. Never left Emma's side, his voice filling every corner with the sound of desperation and love and a promise that he would not let her slip away into the same silence that had held him captive for so long. As they loaded Emma onto the stretcher, Hush tried to follow. A paramedic gently held him back. I'm sorry, buddy, you can't come. But Hush had already done his job. He'd found his voice when it mattered most. And he'd saved her. At the hospital, they discovered Emma had developed meningitis. The infection had spiked her fever dangerously high. Another hour, maybe 2, and it could have caused brain damage. Permanent hearing loss beyond what she already had. Worse. The doctor told Sarah she was incredibly lucky she'd caught it when she did. I didn't catch it, Sarah said, voice breaking as she looked at her sleeping daughter, now stabilized with IVs. Our dog did. When Emma finally woke, groggy and confused in the hospital bed, Sarah signed the story to her. How Hush had barked. How he'd saved her. How he'd found his voice because she needed him to. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She signed back, hands weak but determined. He talked for me. He talked for you, Sarah confirmed. 3 days later, when they returned home, Hush met them at the door. His tail wasn't just slightly raised now, it was wagging. Actually, wagging. And when Emma knelt down and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, Hush made a sound. Not a bark this time. A soft, gentle whimper. The sound of a soul finally allowing itself to be loved. To trust. To hope. Emma pulled back and looked into his eyes, her hands signing slowly. Thank you. You saved me. And Hush licked her cheek. Once. Softly. The way love speaks when words aren't enough. Sometimes, miracles don't look like lightning from heaven. Sometimes they look like a little girl and a broken dog sitting in silence, learning each other's language. Learning that healing doesn't always make noise. Until the moment it needs to. Hush barks, now. Not often, and never without reason. But when he does, Emma can't hear it, and somehow, that makes it more beautiful. Because she knows he found his voice, not for the world, but for her. They take walks now, the 3 of them. Emma holds Hush's leash. Loosely, trusting him to stay close. And he does. Always. Not because he's trained to. Because he wants to. Love doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it signs. Sometimes it simply sits beside you in the quiet, and refuses to leave. And sometimes, when it matters most, it finds its voice. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and join us every week for stories of faith, hope, and the love that heals both humans and animals. You're watching Paws and Light, where every story is a prayer you can feel.